Have you ever noticed how quiet people get when you start getting stronger? Not louder, stronger. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually. At first, they pretend to clap. They say things like, "You've changed," as if it's a crime. But the moment you stop needing their approval and start choosing your own peace, their energy shifts. The silence isn't supportive anymore. It's suspicious, uncomfortable, distant. Why? Because your strength forces them to confront their own weakness. It's like an old pair of shoes they wore every day, scuffed, stepped on, taken for granted. But the moment those shoes are cleaned, polished, and placed behind glass, they suddenly want them back. They don't miss the shoes, they miss the version that served them quietly. Just like that, when you outgrow your old role, they don't admire your strength. They resent losing access. Because when you rise, you disrupt the balance. You unsettle people who depended on your doubt, your hesitation, your self-sacrifice. And as you become stronger, you don't need to speak louder. Your peace becomes the message, your silence becomes the boundary, and your growth becomes the mirror. And not everyone can handle their reflection. So what really happens when you get stronger? Why do people act so different when you stop breaking yourself to make them comfortable? Stay until the end, because the truth behind their shift might finally set you free. Let's begin. Number 1, they downplay your growth. Let's talk about one of the most subtle yet telling shifts that happens when you become stronger, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. In the beginning, people cheer for you. They applaud your efforts, offer encouragement, and tell you they're proud of you. But the moment your growth becomes undeniable, when you no longer doubt yourself, when you start setting boundaries, when you stop shrinking to make others comfortable, something changes. Suddenly they stop clapping, they go quiet, they start making little comments like, "You've changed," or "You're just lucky." And instead of admiration, what you now feel from them is discomfort. Here's the truth. People who can't keep up with your growth will try to downplay it. They'll pretend it's not impressive, minimize your effort, or make you feel like your evolution isn't real. Why? Because your strength shines a light on what they haven't yet faced within themselves. When you rise, you unintentionally hold up a mirror. And what they see in that reflection isn't always easy to accept. So rather than doing the work to rise with you, they try to pull you back down through sarcasm, through subtle dismissals, or through emotional withdrawal. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes your anchor. Seneca once said, "Those who cannot match your rise will try to lower its value." That's not just philosophy, it's real life. When someone can't match your emotional maturity, your discipline, or your inner peace, they might not challenge you directly, but they will try to rewrite the narrative. They'll say you got lucky. They'll say it's just a phase. But don't be fooled. Their words aren't an assessment of your journey. They're a confession of their own insecurity. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Amanda, used to be the one everyone leaned on. She'd always say yes, always be available, and always put others first. But over time, she started doing the work. Therapy, boundaries, journaling, meditation. Slowly but surely, she stopped apologizing for having needs. She started saying no. She started taking care of herself first. And that's when it started. People who once praised her called her selfish. Friends who used to rely on her said, "You're different now, but not in a kind way." Amanda realized they didn't hate the new her. They just missed the version of her who didn't know her own worth. So what do you do when people downplay your growth? First, don't shrink to make others feel comfortable. Your evolution isn't something to be hidden, it's something to be honored. Second, stop seeking validation from those who secretly fear your strength. You don't need their approval to keep growing. And finally, let them feel whatever they feel, but keep rising anyway. At the end of the day, your growth may make some people uncomfortable, but that's not your burden to carry. Let their discomfort reveal who's truly for you and who only liked you when you were easier to control. Keep evolving, keep rising. Let their silence be your confirmation. Number 2, they test your boundaries subtly. Let's talk about what happens when your growth starts showing, not just in words, but in actions. When you begin to get stronger, one of the first things that shifts is your boundaries. You no longer say yes when you mean no. You stop over-explaining yourself. You protect your energy. But instead of respecting those changes, some people, often the ones who benefited from your old, quieter self, start testing your limits. Not directly, not loudly, but subtly. Like someone tapping on a wall to see if it's hollow. Here's the truth. The stronger you become, the more some people will try to check if your boundaries are real. They'll send little guilt trips your way. "Oh, I guess you're too busy for us now." They'll make passive-aggressive remarks masked as jokes. Must be nice to be so self-important these days. They won't attack you head-on. That would require confrontation. Instead, they'll prod gently, hoping you'll crack. Hoping the old you, the one who kept the peace, who avoided conflict, who kept quiet, will come back just long enough for them to slip past your defenses. This is where Stoic wisdom grounds you. Marcus Aurelius said, "He who respects himself will unsettle those who relied on his silence." That one sentence explains everything. When you begin to respect yourself, truly and unapologetically, it doesn't just change your life, it disrupts theirs. Especially for those who built their comfort on your silence, your compliance, your lack of boundaries. Now that you're standing tall, they don't know how to act. So instead of adjusting, they test. Let me share a story. A man I know, let's call him Eric, used to be the go-to guy for everything. Need a last-minute favor? Call Eric. Need someone to listen, no matter how drained he was? Eric would never say no. But after years of burning out, he made a change. Therapy, self-work, journaling, it all led to one thing: boundaries. And that's when the subtle pushback began. His brother started saying things like, "You used to be more generous." A co-worker joked, "You're too good for overtime now?" At first, Eric felt guilty, but then he realized it wasn't that he was doing anything wrong. It was that he stopped being easy to manipulate. So how do you handle these subtle tests? First, don't respond emotionally. Their little jabs are designed to provoke. Don't give them what they're looking for. Second, reaffirm your boundary silently. You don't need to explain or defend your choices. Your peace is reason enough. And third, remember this: every time you stand firm, you're teaching people how to treat you. You're reminding them that the old version of you, the one who tolerated everything, is gone. At the end of the day, some people will test your growth because they miss the version of you who let them get away with too much. Let them test, let them wonder, but never let them break through. Boundaries aren't walls to keep love out. They're walls to keep your dignity in. If you found this valuable, hit like and subscribe for more powerful insights. Number 3, they start competing with you. You didn't sign up for a competition. You were just trying to grow mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Maybe you started meditating. Maybe you built discipline. Maybe you finally found some inner peace. But suddenly, someone close to you starts turning it into a scoreboard. They start copying your habits, but not out of admiration. out of rivalry. If you wake up early, they wake up earlier. If you hit a new goal, they hit too. If you speak calmly, they speak quieter, almost performative. And without realizing it, your peace has become their threat. Here's the truth. Some people don't want to grow with you. They want to outgrow you, just to say they did. They won't say it out loud. They'll keep the tone friendly, but underneath it, you'll feel it. A subtle tension, a pressure to keep one-upping. You didn't start a race, but now they're sprinting beside you, looking over their shoulder every 5 steps to make sure they're ahead. This isn't about connection anymore. It's about comparison. That's when you remember the Stoic truth. The wise do not race the insecure. They walk their path, undistracted. Epictetus. Wisdom isn't about beating anyone. It's about becoming better than you were yesterday. When you truly understand that, you stop looking sideways. You stop feeling the need to prove anything. You just walk, slow, steady, unshaken. Let me tell you about someone. His name's Daniel. A quiet guy, disciplined. Started working on himself after years of being overlooked. No big announcements, no show. He just changed. One of his friends, someone he'd known since college, began mirroring him. Joined the same gym. Started reading Stoic books. Even tried mimicking Daniel's speech patterns. At first, Daniel thought it was support, but then came the subtle digs. "I did double your reps today," or "You still on level 1? I've already moved past that." What started as admiration became hidden competition. Daniel had a choice: get pulled into the race or keep walking his own pace. He chose the latter. He stopped comparing, stopped reacting. He didn't gloat when he advanced, and he didn't flinch when his friend tried to provoke. Over time, the friend lost steam. The race wasn't fun when the other person wasn't running. Here's the truth. People who secretly compete with you are at war with themselves. Your growth only highlights their stagnation, so they run harder, not to grow, but to outpace the mirror you unknowingly became. But their ego is not your responsibility. So when someone turns your peace into a scoreboard, stay still. Let them run. Let them sweat. Let them chase shadows. But you stay in your lane. You walk with grace. Because true strength doesn't need to win, it just needs to stay grounded. Number 4, they pull away emotionally. You didn't change to push anyone away. You changed to come home to yourself. But as your inner strength deepens, you'll notice something strange. The people who once felt close begin to drift. Not with anger, not with conflict, but with quiet distance. They stop calling as often. Their replies get shorter. The warmth fades, and you're left wondering, what did I do? But here's the truth. You didn't offend them. You exposed them. Your calm disrupts their chaos. Your discipline highlights their avoidance. Your growth reflects everything they've been running from. And instead of facing that mirror, they pull away. This isn't rejection, it's discomfort. Your presence reminds them of the work they haven't done. You didn't preach, you didn't judge, you just evolved. But for someone who's been living in denial, your evolution feels like pressure. They'll convince themselves that you've changed too much, that you're distant now, that you think you're better. But it's not about you, it's about what your growth reveals in them. This is where Stoic wisdom steadies you. Seneca said, "The awakened soul will lose company, but never itself." When you start choosing peace over chaos, truth over pretense, stillness over drama, you will lose people. But you won't lose yourself. And that's the trade that matters. Let me share a story. Her name's Emily. For years, she had a friend named Jessica. Wild, impulsive, the life of every room. Emily loved her energy, but over time, it began to drain her. So Emily started pulling back. She set boundaries, focused on therapy, meditation, quiet mornings. She didn't announce it, she just shifted. That's when Jessica started to disappear. Fewer texts, less enthusiasm. One day, Emily asked, "Did I do something wrong?" Jessica said, "No, you're just different now." That sentence stuck. You're just different now. Not worse, not wrong, just different. And that difference made Jessica uncomfortable, not because Emily had changed for the worse, but because she had changed for the better. Emily realized she wasn't losing a friend, she was shedding a dynamic that no longer aligned. And that hurt, but it also healed. So when someone pulls away as you grow, let them. Don't chase, don't shrink, don't apologize for evolving. Their emotional withdrawal isn't punishment, it's projection. They're retreating from the version of you that no longer fits into their old world. And that's okay. Because the truth is, growth is lonely, but so is staying stuck. And if the choice is between losing someone else or losing yourself, choose you. Every single time. If you've watched the video this far, don't forget to leave a comment with a thank God and give it a like if you enjoyed the content. Your support means a lot and motivates me to keep creating more interesting videos. I hope you find inspiration in them and that we continue learning together. Thank you for your support. Number 5, they bring up the past constantly. You're doing the work, evolving, getting stronger, not just on the outside, but deep within. You're calmer now, wiser, clearer about who you are and what you will no longer tolerate. But just when you start feeling proud of the person you've become, someone shows up with a memory, a moment from years ago, a joke you no longer laugh at, a version of you that no longer fits. Remember when you used to. Don't act like you've changed that much. And just like that, your past is dragged into the room, uninvited. Why do they do it? Because your present makes them uncomfortable. Growth to them is threatening, not inspiring. They don't know how to talk to this version of you, so they retreat to the one they understood. They call it just teasing or keeping it real, but it's not. It's a quiet attempt to shrink you, to remind you of your old limits so they don't have to confront your new strength. Because the truth is, some people would rather keep you familiar than allow you to grow unfamiliar, even if unfamiliar means healthier, stronger, and freer. The Stoics saw through this long ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Let no man chain you to a version you've outlived." You're not who you were last year. You're not even who you were last week. Evolution is your birthright. And anyone who keeps replaying your past isn't honoring your growth. They're trying to manage it. Because in your past, they felt in control. They knew how to handle you back then. Now, they feel lost. Let me share a story. A guy named Brian went through a deep transformation. He used to be reactive, quick to anger, always needing to prove himself. But after years of therapy and Stoic practice, he became grounded. He listened more, reacted less, and held boundaries without guilt. But one of his childhood friends, Jake, couldn't adjust. Every time they met, Jake brought up Brian's old temper, called him hothead as a joke, told others, "Don't be fooled, he's still the same underneath." At first, Brian laughed it off, but over time, he realized Jake wasn't joking. He was uncomfortable with Brian's growth. He needed him to stay small to feel big himself. So Brian stopped laughing. He stopped apologizing for changing. and eventually he walked away from that friendship. Because no matter how much history you share with someone, if they can't honor who you're becoming, they don't deserve a front row seat in your journey. Here's the truth. Your past is proof that you've grown, not a prison to be held in. When people bring it up to limit you, remember, it says more about their comfort than your character. You're not here to stay recognizable. You're here to become unshakable. Let them keep their memories. You've got a future to build. Number 6. They accuse you of being cold. As you grow stronger, you start protecting your energy. You stop saying yes out of guilt. You no longer explain yourself to people who misunderstand you on purpose. You choose peace over pleasing. And suddenly, the people who once praised your kindness start calling you cold, arrogant, selfish, distant. But you're not being cruel. You've just stopped breaking yourself to comfort others. This shift unnerves people because the version of you they miss wasn't real strength. It was overextension. It was exhaustion packaged as loyalty. It was saying yes while silently burning out. Now, when you say no, it sounds foreign to them. When you set boundaries, they call it attitude. But here's what they don't understand. Your strength isn't an attack, it's a shield. You're not cold, you're just no longer accessible to chaos. Seneca wrote, "He who no longer bends is not unkind, he has simply learned not to break." That's the truth. People who relied on your softness to take advantage will always frame your healing as hostility. But strength isn't measured by how many people you please, it's measured by how well you protect your peace. And the moment you stop bending for people who refuse to grow, they call it a problem. Not because you've changed for the worse, but because you've stopped making them comfortable. Let me tell you about someone named Nathan. For years, he was the nice guy, always available, always agreeable, always fixing everyone else's mess. But after his third burnout, he pulled back, started saying no, started choosing solitude, started valuing himself, and that's when the accusations started. You've changed. You're not as warm anymore. Why are you so distant? But Nathan hadn't turned cold. He had finally started honoring the warmth he used to give away freely. When you become stronger, people who benefited from your weakness won't celebrate. They'll complain. They'll try to guilt you back into old patterns. They'll miss the version of you that abandoned yourself for their comfort. But that version of you was tired, lost, depleted, and you owe it to yourself not to go back. You're not required to be accessible to everyone. You're not cold for protecting your energy. You're not selfish for choosing silence. Real strength is quiet. Real strength is calm. And real strength will always be misunderstood by those who refuse to grow with you. So the next time someone accuses you of being cold, smile gently. And remember, they're not mad at your coldness. They're mourning their access. Number 7. They try to trigger the old you. The moment you start evolving, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, there will be people who don't clap for you. They test you. Not with loud challenges, but with subtle provocations. They'll crack old jokes you've outgrown. They'll bring up habits you buried. They'll say things like, "You used to be more fun," or "You're too serious now." But what they're really saying is, "I miss the version of you I could control." They aren't celebrating your growth. They're trying to pull you back into an older version of yourself, a version that tolerated disrespect, laughed off red flags, and mistook chaos for connection. And why do they do this? Because the old you was easier for them, easier to dismiss, easier to manipulate, easier to predict. It's important to understand what's really happening. When someone tries to provoke the old you, they're uncomfortable with your boundaries. They don't like your new calm. Your silence unsettles them. Your peace makes them restless. So they poke, prod, and joke, not because they're playful, but because they want confirmation that you haven't really changed. They want to see if you'll break character. But as Marcus Aurelius said, to remain unmoved by old provocations is to prove you have truly changed. And that's where your power lies. Not in reacting, but in remaining grounded. Not in defending who you've become, but in embodying it. Let me tell you about someone named Rachel. A few years ago, she was always the one laughing the loudest at her own expense. She stayed in toxic relationships, tolerated cruel humor, and said, "It's fine," even when it wasn't. But after years of inner work, Rachel became different, quieter, more centered, more intentional, and her old friends noticed. They started saying, "You used to be wild," or "You've lost your spark." But Rachel hadn't lost anything. She had found herself. One day, an old friend made a joke that used to trigger her, something sarcastic, sharp, designed to get a rise out of her. But Rachel didn't laugh. She didn't flinch. She just looked at him, smiled softly, and changed the subject. That moment said more than any confrontation ever could. She wasn't that person anymore, and she wasn't going back. Growth threatens people who haven't grown. Your strength, your peace, your boundaries, they're not just shifts in behavior, they're proof of transformation. And the people who try to bring back the old you aren't really joking, they're testing. So stay unmoved. Let them miss the old version. Let them joke. Let them poke. Just don't hand them the satisfaction of dragging you backwards. Because every time you choose not to react, you're not just protecting your peace, you're proving it was real. If you believe this video can help others, give it a like. It helps the YouTube algorithm show it to more people. And don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content coming your way. Share your thoughts in the comments. I will definitely reply.